Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor and Carrie Brown coming at you with another episode of Living the Smarter Science of Slim. Carrie, how are you living today?
I am full of turkey.
You're full of turkey from Thanksgiving?
No.
All right, well, how are you full of turkey from?
From the leftovers from Thanksgiving.
Fair. Well, it's funny because this podcast is probably going to air sometime in late Q1 of 2013, but we're recording it now around Thanksgiving, so there you go. But yes, and Carrie actually just brought in some leftover turkey and some spectacular SANE dishes for me to try, so I am recording this podcast on a full stomach, and I've got endorphins rushing around in my brain from all this delicious SANE food. So Carrie, describe to the lovely listeners what I was munching on.
Well, I was just going to say that you were fat and happy, but of course you're not fat and happy at all. You're lean and happy.
Yeah, I was at one out of two is accurate.
So I made you turkey. Well, I haven't named it yet, but I'm thinking it'll be turkey and leek casserole because, you know, leeks had to be in there somewhere.
Which to me tasted a bit like a chicken pot pie, which was fabulous.
Which apparently tasted like chicken pot pie, but used up a pound of that leftover turkey. So that was good. And then I made a prototype of a peanut butter chocolate refrigerator cookie, which Jonathan loved. And I say prototype because I don't think most of the world will love it, so I need to make a version that everybody else will love. And then, what else? Oh,
the tomato.
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 I made some tomato basil biscuits.
Tomato basil.
Which were incredibly tomatoey.
And basil-y.
And basil-y. And Bailor thought they were awesome.
I very much enjoyed them.
So there, that was Jonathan's little pre-podcast feast.
So my little pre-podcast feast has got me energized and ready for today. We're going to do some more FAQs. Actually, I'm going to stop saying that because we're just going to be doing FAQs for a while because there's quite a few frequently asked questions. So happy to help. First question we're going to cover today has to do with traditional exercise. And basically, when people listen to The Smarter Science of Slim and they read the book, some people get the impression that we are saying traditional exercise is bad. So the question is basically, should I avoid traditional exercise? That's the FAQ.
Can I give you my answer to that?
Sure.
Yes, all exercise should be avoided at all costs.
Okay, not all exercise. Because the Smarter Science of Slim does recommend some exercise, but let me give you...
I'm joking.
Let me give Let me give you the answer that, at least, so what my research shows. So a couple things. So I think it makes most sense, Carrie, for us to break down the various types of exercise. So I like to pivot this with two factors. So let's look at intensity and let's look at impact. So if we look at those two factors, so let's talk about low intensity, low impact activities. That's like walking, right?
Okay.
You can do it for a long time, low intensity, and it's not banging on your joints, low impact. Also,
I like doing walking.
Yeah, walking.
As long as it's flat.
Yep, walking, casual bike riding, playing with your kids or your niece or your nephews, or just things we would generally describe as just being active. That is fabulous for you. Like, we should absolutely do as much of that as we can. Our bodies were designed to be active. The more active we are, the healthier we'll become. And we're not really going to wear down our bodies because it's just that's the natural state our body is designed to be in. So that is all good. Okay, let's go to the complete other end of the spectrum now. So that's low impact, low intensity activity. The other end of the spectrum, we have high impact, high intensity activity. Now this would be things like these extreme workout DVDs we see, or boot camp classes, or doing sprints, or running up stadium steps, or a lot of the training you will see for intense athletics like football or wrestling, where you're really working hard, but you're also taking quite a toll on your body. Now, this type of exercise is metabolically beneficial, but it really does take a lot of negative toll on your body. It's sort of like boxing for exercise. It's good exercise, but you're also messing up your brain. So it's probably not our best option. So when we talk about, so first we talked about low intensity, low impact activities, good stuff. High intensity, high impact, not as good. I mean, the high intensity is good, but the high impact is not so much. What we want to do is go like in the middle. We want to do high intensity, low impact activities. And those are things like the eccentric training we've talked about, because your joints aren't banging. It's a very slow, controlled movement. Also things like the...
Very slow if you're not so good at it.
Exactly, very slow. And even our version, our smarter interval training, because you're not moving quickly, you're moving forcefully, and you're doing it on a machine such as a bike or an elliptical machine that allows you to move into a continuous motion. And again, you're not putting that pressure on your joints. So that is really the sweet spot of exercise, because it's that high intensity that activates all of our muscle fibers, triggers all those clog clearing hormones, and the fact that it's a low impact means that we can do it for the rest of our lives, which we know we have to do if we want to continue our health for the rest of our lives. So far we've talked about 3 forms of exercise: low intensity, low impact, which is good, and just let's call that activity. Let's not even call that exercise. We've talked about high intensity, high impact, extreme exercise. I would recommend against that. Then we have smarter exercise, which of course we're all about. Then we have what most people think of when they call traditional exercise. This is high impact, low intensity / medium intensity activity. And as you can probably gather, that's bad on both fronts. Like, the intensity isn't enough to do anything to our body, and it's high impact. Jogging is the perfect example. When you jog, you can go out and you jog. People jog for an hour on pavement. They're banging on their joints, and they get out of breath, but you do it for an hour, and you just, you're like, but you're not exhausted. And it's not intense enough to really cause any metabolic change, and it's super high impact. So it's 0 for 2. So do I think traditional aerobic, low quality, high impact, low to moderate intensity activity is good for us? No, I would avoid it, and I would advise against it. And that's also why in really any magazine that targets individuals who do these kinds of activities, like Runner's World, half the magazine is about injury management, because these types of exercises just fundamentally break us down over time. And if you enjoy them, that's one thing. Think of it as a hobby. But if you're asking me, Jonathan, what type of exercise should I do to maximize my metabolic health and my overall health? You should do low intensity, low impact activity, and you should do high intensity, low impact eccentric training and smarter interval training. Everything else is counterproductive.
Awesome.
What do you think?
I have thought for as long as I remember being able to think that jogging was stupid.
Okay.
I'm thrilled to hear you say.
So yeah, you don't need to feel bad for not doing it.
Jogging is not where it's at.
Well, and also keep in mind that things like
I feel
jogging,
validated now.
No, that's good. And they also have a tendency to, we already talked about this, but stimulate your appetite. When you do these very low or just moderate intensity activities, so walking generally doesn't make you hungry, but if you go for a jog, people are like, oh my God, I'm hungry. And it also causes a psychology of, man, I jogged for an hour. I deserve this ice cream sundae. So you get hungrier. You have a tendency to crave starchy and sweet foods. So it's not only breaking your body down, but then it's making it harder for you to stay sane. So it's really a double-edged sword, whereas when you do low-intensity activities, they don't stimulate hunger. And when you do very high-intensity activities that are low impact, it generally raises your heart rate so high and it's so intense that you don't want to eat anything. Like you're.
If you have not done eccentric exercise, that he has never said a truer thing in his life. When I first started doing them, it was as much as I could do to climb off the bike, let alone the thought of actually going and constructing something in the kitchen was just like completely beyond me. But I wasn't hungry. I mean, no. It did not stimulate my appetite.
Yeah, for a lot of people, myself included, and the research shows this as well, it's an appetite suppressant. And a lot of this is because you're putting so much stress on your body. Digesting and metabolizing food is actually very metabolically expensive for your body. We burn about 1/3 of the calories we do over the course of a day just converting food into energy. So when our body is going through extreme stress, such as the exercise type induced stress, we're not like, oh, I'm just craving food. I mean, think about people that are, again, running marathons and things like that. They need to constantly refuel themselves. But when we're doing burst type training, that's not as much of an appetite stimulant. It's more of an appetite suppressant. So helps us, I guess, in that sense too, because it makes it easier to stay sane because we don't finish up and we're not craving a big bowl of ice cream.
Awesome.
So that's all good. The other type of activity I want to call out, because there are people in the world, Carrie, I know it's hard for you and I to believe, but there are people in the world that do enjoy exercise. And I would encourage, especially in the States, we're not, I mean, some people are, but there's a whole class of quote-unquote exercise that I personally don't think we leverage enough. And I like to call these types of exercises restorative exercises. And these are things like yoga or Tai Chi or even meditation or stretching. These types of activities, or Pilates, these types of activities help to restore and heal our body, which when we're doing very high intensity, low impact exercise can be very helpful because it's a little bit of a yin and a yang. We're going to stretch those muscles out, help them to relax, help them to get the blood flowing right after we traumatize them in a good way. That's a great balancing act there. So if you have some spare time and you just want to do stuff, be active, do your smarter exercise, and then take a yoga class, try Pilates, get flexible, try some Tai Chi. Try these things that we don't do as much in the West, which I think we should. They're great things.
Do you have a view on hot yoga?
I don't know too much about the differences between hot and cold yoga or any other kind of yoga. I personally just yoga all up, love it. I started doing yoga, not in classes or anything like that, but I read a book, great book called The Real Men Do Yoga. I don't know if it's still out. This was 10 years ago. And I started doing yoga just because I was not training smarter at that time. So I had all kinds of back pain and knee pain. And I was just horribly inflexible. If I bent at the waist, I could get maybe 4 inches below my knee, but that's it. Like not even close to touching the floor. Which, I mean, to be clear,
wow.
in men, I mean, if you look at men that have some muscle on their body, I would say that that's pretty typical. That complete lack of flexibility. So I started to do just the stretching portions of yoga. I've never looked back since. And I mean, I do it once a week now. I don't have to do a lot of it, but just the stretching, it's about a half hour a week. And it's combined with the fact that I've moved my training to be smarter, but no chronic pain anywhere. It's like, I think it's just a wonderful complement to intense strength training.
And I've heard, and I've never done yoga, well, a couple of times, but I've heard it's very good emotionally too.
Yes.
And mentally for that whole, which, you know, it's got to be good in today's mad world.
And the other thing that's really good about yoga is a lot of people who do yoga and then read The Smarter Science of Slim actually tell me those are the people that understand eccentric training, because in yoga, what you do is you get into a challenging position and you hold it. There's no like move quickly and flail around. It's put your body in this interesting position that's challenging and now hold it. Very calm, breathe. It's incredible. You're sweating. You leave the class and you're like, oh my gosh, that was so hard. But if you just watch someone doing it, again, it's not like this insanity, crazy, extreme. It's this very controlled, deliberate, safe movement. And really, eccentric training, in some ways, if you think about it, is kind of like weighted yoga, kind of, because we're saying get in this position and now slowly either hold it or slowly lower it over the count of 10 seconds, which is what you do in a yoga class just with your own body weight.
It's interesting because while I've never done yoga, and everyone that's listened to any of these podcasts know that I don't really enjoy exercise, I did do ballet for 17 years.
There you go.
And it has often struck me when I'm doing my eccentric exercises how similar the ballet, not the dancing, but the exercises, which is most of what ballet is very much like yoga, and it's all about, holding, your leg in a really strange position for a long period of time.
Absolutely.
And I do love that, so that's probably why the whole eccentric thing makes so much sense to me.
Well, I actually love that you brought up ballet, because I think one paradigm shift that I'm sorry to use that word because I know it's kind of trite and business-y, business excellence paradigm shift, very Dilbert-esque word, but we tend to have this very, I'm going to call it brutish approach to exercise. At least that's been my experience.
Did you say British or brutish?
Brutish.
Okay.
Brutish.
Just
like
to be clear.
Like do more weight and sweat and blah blah blah, and it's like extreme blah, as if that's somehow boot camp. Blah.
Yeah, that's not very British at all.
But
old chap.
If we look at things like gymnasts or ballet or yoga or eccentric training or smarter exercise, they're the opposite of that. They're slow and controlled and deliberate. And here's why I like that. When you think of what we're trying to do to our body, in many ways, a good metaphor is sculpting. We're trying to sculpt our bodies. Now, when a sculptor is working on a piece of marble or clay, they're not whacking it with hammers and they're not brute forcing anything. They're very meticulously and very deliberately taking very calculated strikes. That's what I want us to do when we exercise. I want it to be very meticulous. I want it to be very calculated. I want it to be very slow. And I want it to be very safe. We're not going to waste any movement. And that, because of that, we're not going to hurt ourselves. We are going to see lasting change, and we will be able to keep it up for our whole lives. And that's really important because, again, anything we do to improve our health and fitness, we have to keep doing, or it's counterproductive. And I know that DVD looks cool. You look on TV and everyone who is on the infomercial has six-pack abs, and never mind the fact that they're 23 and that's what they do for their job. I bet you it wasn't the DVD that made them look that way. Just like you watch people play basketball and they're all tall, that doesn't mean basketball made them tall. It means tall people play basketball. So you know, you won't get young and skinny by doing those exercises. You will, however, likely hurt yourself, and no matter what, you won't be able to do it in 20 years. So why not just pick up an approach today that you'll be able to carry through the rest of your life? Works for me.
So if people do want to do, because I know a lot of people, there's a social element to it. If they want to keep going to a class, yoga or ballet or something like that would be a good choice.
Absolutely, and that's the last thing I'll say on this subject here is that, so let's be very clear and summarize. One is general being active. Define being active as something that you can do without sweating, essentially. Just walking around, playing with your kids. Do that as much as you want/can. It's great for your health. Studies are unambiguous on that. So low intensity, low impact, awesome, do it. High intensity, low impact, that's smarter exercise, awesome, do it. Restorative things, Pilates, yoga, Tai Chi, ballet, do it. Things like, let's say you and your friends like to do a cardio kickboxing class. If you do that for fun, that's fine. However, do it intelligently, meaning don't think that because you did it, you now have a free pass to go sane.
You do not have a calorie deficit.
You do not, thank you. You do not have a calorie deficit. You don't. And know that you are going to start craving stuff afterwards, and just be aware of that because then you can fight it off more easily. And don't do it the day before you're supposed to do your eccentric exercise. If possible, do it right after or the day after so that you still have those 5 days to recover so that you don't compromise your eccentric exercise. Think of it as a hobby. Like if you want to go out and play basketball, you're doing that because you like to play basketball, not because it's exercise. If you want to go do ultimate fighting, that's because you like to do ultimate fighting. That's not your exercise. Your exercise should be being active, restorative activity, or smarter exercise. Those are exercises in my book. Everything else is an activity, and those are a hobby, and those hobbies may have negative consequences, and you just need to weigh the cost benefit. That's it. But it's totally up to you. If you enjoy it and you're able to do it, more power to you.
What about swimming?
Carrie, swimming is an interesting one because swimming is great from a low impact perspective, but it's not particularly easy to add resistance to swimming. Like on a bicycle, right? You can continually add resistance. There might be a way. Put it this way, swimming is better than any moderate intensity activity that is also higher impact. So for example, jogging. I'd rather you swim than you jog, but I'd rather you do, like we talked about, the restorative activities or smarter exercise. But again, if you just like swimming because you like swimming, more power to you. Just don't do it the day before you're going to train eccentrically.
I can't swim.
Well, it makes it easy for you.
I was asking for everybody else.
What about sinking? Is that a good...
I'm very, very good at sinking. It's one of my core competencies, sinking. But I know that a lot of people love to swim, and I think it's a good skill to have.
Absolutely.
save your life. But I just wondered where that came on your scale of things to do or not do.
Yeah, and just remember, if we haven't covered it here, there's two criteria to look at. One is how likely are you to get hurt, meaning like how much inappropriate stress is it putting on your body, and then how intense is it, meaning is there a way for you to do it where you can do it for short. Actually, with swimming, you probably could do this. You could probably do sprints in the pool where you just swim as hard as you possibly can for 30 seconds and you can't swim anymore. That would be great. But you just need to pick an exercise that is not going to put unnecessary stress on your body, aka you're not pounding your joints, and an exercise that you are able to increase the intensity so much that you are not able to do it for more than 30 seconds to a minute at a time. And of course, don't just do that by speeding up, such as sprinting versus jogging, because that, again, causes a risk. So it's got to be low impact and it's got to be high intensity. Now that I think about it more, swimming probably could be done in that way. So if you like swimming, sounds like it's a viable option.
Okay.
The last thing I'll mention while we're on this subject of exercise and yada, 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 is just one last disclaimer, is that anyone who tells you that you need to do some whiz-bang ABC, TRX, QFJ, P957 complicated exercise routine is likely more interested in taking your money than they are in helping you get healthy. Exercise is not complicated. Now, let me clarify this real quick here, Carrie. If our goal is to be an elite athlete, that is very complicated, and that requires sports-specific training, and you probably need all kinds of stuff to help you. However, if our goal is to be healthy and fit, just like the way we do that via eating is simple. It may not be easy, but it's simple. The way we do that via exercise is simple. Anyone who's trying to complicate it, again, you just have to ask why. What is the marginal benefit if I stand on this ball with one leg and hold this kettlebell above my head, which is just a dumbbell with the handle positioned in a different area? It's not some magical new device. While I spin on my head, like, yes, that might make you sweat and you might feel it the next day, but why? Like, why do you need to do that other than for the personal trainer to make you feel like you can't possibly exercise unless they come with you because it's so darn complicated?
And I think that goes back to the whole one. I think a lot of people, they have their best interests at heart. They don't understand the science behind how it works. So they do think that they're doing us all a favour.
Absolutely.
But also, I think because, and this is coming from someone who's been on the dark side, it feels like it must be hard and complicated because we've tried everything and it doesn't work. So therefore, it must be hard and complicated because we can't do it.
Yep.
But I think, so the paradigm shift, you have to reverse that thinking before everything else will actually work. And
this actually reminds me, I love that you brought that up. The whole fact that we think it must be complicated because we've tried so much and it hasn't worked.
Right.
Stephen Covey, we've used the word paradigm shift like 6 times in this podcast, so we have to credit him. He's the guy who brought this idea of shifting one's paradigm to the surface with his book, The 7 Habits, which I think came out in either the late 80s or early 90s. Wonderful book. I got a chance to meet Stephen, and he's a brilliant, brilliant man. The idea, or the analogy he uses in his book, is talking about how you could imagine that we were back in the day where we still bled people. Like what doctors did to cure diseases was to bleed people. They would literally cut them and think that if they drained enough of the bad blood out of the person, they wouldn't be sick anymore, right? Because
they got leeches to suck it out.
They got leeches, not to be confused with leeks that are quite delicious.
Which are quite delicious.
Unlike, if you serve me leech casserole,
We'd have a problem.
So, but what Covey talks about in his book, and forgive me if I'm misrepresenting this or confusing myself in some way, is if you think that bleeding someone is the proper approach, you're going to try all this crazy, like, new bleeding techniques, and we're going to hang you from the ceiling while we bleed you, and we're going to do all of this fancy blood thinner medication so that bleeding becomes more effective. The problem is that bleeding is not the right approach.
Right.
It doesn't matter what technique you use on top of that, it's wrong. You're facing north when you need to be facing south. What people then discovered with medicine was that the concept of bacteria and viruses, and that if we just wash our hands, oh wow, like people don't get sick anymore. The same kind of thing applies here. We are on the brink, and I promise you, at least I'm going to dedicate my life to, 50 years from now, we're going to look back on starving ourselves, either by eating less or by exercising more, as we look back on using leeches for medicine. It's just like, actually this metaphor might work really well. Using leeches or bleeding is all about like, oh, the blood is bad. We need to do everything we can to remove the blood from the body. Now we're like, oh, food is bad, calories are bad. We need to do everything we can to eat less and exercise more and remove that from the body. False. We have a misunderstanding of the system. It's not our fault. It's the people's fault that told us. And now it's just time to get the new science on the surface. That's the science of quality. And once we have that paradigm, it's just don't wash your hands. I mean, just wash your hands and your patient won't get infected. It's not complicated.
And look how simple that was. Yeah, it was simple.
So, but you've got to have that information first. So, wow, we just covered it. That was a
you didn't expect it to take that long,
answer to that question. So why don't you summarize what you think we've covered here, Carrie? Because I think I've talked a lot.
Well, exercise is not really my strength of the two of us, is it? If we could talk about legs, I could talk the hind leg off a donkey. But yeah, when it comes to exercise, that's not me. What do? I do 10 minutes of eccentric stuff every week. I do my 10 minutes on the bike every week, and I call it good.
And I love that. So let's talk about here's a what to do. So here's the takeaway for folks. Let's say there's two types of people in the world, and there's a spectrum. So there's more, but let's define either end. You've got Carrie on one end of the spectrum. So these are people who, if you never had to exercise ever, and frankly me, if you never had to, but I do like my eccentrics once a week. I like getting pumped up, and I feel like I'm back in my athlete days, like I need to go perform, and it's cool. So you've got Carrie on one end who would prefer to never exercise. Then you have people on the other end who just love exercising. They're all about it. For the Carries of the world, good news.
This is the best thing ever.
Good news.
The best thing ever.
Keep doing what you're doing in terms of like walking upstairs. Take the stairs instead of the elevator if you can. Stay active. That's all good. Don't get a little Segway. Don't get one of those mechanized carts. Walk around. It's good for you. But in terms of like actually going out and exercising, just do your 10 to 20 minutes of eccentrics, your 10 minutes of high quality interval training. You're good to go. Done, complete, and you'll get better results than you ever have before. Good news.
Have I ever told you I loved you?
Now, similarly good news, though, if you're someone on the other end of the spectrum, I've got good news for you, too. The good news is chances are you have not actually seen good aesthetic and health results from your approach. A lot of people run marathons and continue to gain weight. And they're like, how am I gaining weight? I'm running marathons. Well, we all know, but and they will know, too, when they discover the new science. For those people, there's good news, though. Take what you're already doing, think of it as your hobby, and then add to it the eccentric and the smarter interval training. And if what you're doing compromises your ability to do those two things, you may have to scale back a little bit. But for example, maybe you do your eccentrics on Saturday, and then maybe you take Sunday off, and maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe Thursday, you do whatever the heck you want, but really make sure Friday you get a good day of rest so that you're able to really hit those eccentrics. But so if you either end of the spectrum, we can make it work for you. Just be smart about it. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you can find out what works for you. And for all of us, I'd highly encourage us to pursue alternative forms of exercise, these restorative forms of exercise en masse, because they're great for you. They'll make you feel good. And they'll help reframe your mind to think about exercise more as you are a sculptor, very intentionally and deliberately sculpting your body, rather than maybe a construction worker who's just using a jackhammer to try to get results. So, what do you think, Carrie?
I think I will always be down this end of the spectrum.
No
I'm
risk there.
so excited you just gave me permission to do that.
Absolutely. Not only
awesome.
Permission, but endorsement. So, well, folks, thanks for joining us this week on Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we're going to eat more, we're going to exercise less, but we're going to do it smarter. See you next week. Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff, like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.